Hello and welcome to Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick. Uh, we are at a point where we're hearing pretty much on a daily basis about offers and questions about ceasefires or peace deals to end the war of aggression that the United States and Israel illegally launched against Iran. It there's a big disconnect here. Pakistan was leading some peace initiatives, but they also were, their plan was to initiate a ceasefire and then to, deal with the bigger issues. And Iran is refusing that. Iran is refusing, saying they will not settle for a ceasefire. They want a resolution that ends the war. I think ideally they would also say that they would like a resolution that ends 47 years of conflict. But their terms for ending the war, will include sanction relief. It will include, an agreement on the Strait of Hormuz. A lot of things that uh, it's very, very hard to see Donald Trump agreeing to. And, people often bandy about the question of trust and people, say, how can you trust this one? One of the things that I heard a lot of in discussions around as I was urging diplomatic resolution and more serious diplomacy from the Biden administration regarding Russia and Ukraine before Russia invaded. Um, People said, well, you can't negotiate with Putin because you can't trust him. Nobody trusts. This is international relations. There is no trust. Ronald Reagan famously said, trust but verify. What that means is you don't trust. Okay. And that means also with your allies. It's not only with adversaries. You don't do handshake deals. Even with, again, even with allies, you put it down on a piece of paper and you make these agreements and you construct them in such a way that there are penalties and consequences if one side or the other fails to live up to their side of the agreement, whether intentionally or not even. You leave these things in place so that you don't trust. You're not just giving a promise. I mean, just think about the United States. And if you're a country doing some deal with the US, I mean, you don't know what the next administration is going to be like. You don't know what the next Congress is going to be like. And it's not like you can think, as you can with, for example, dictatorships that may be in power for decades. You can't think necessarily just in terms of, that many years. You have to think in terms of 4 years or even 2 years down the road, and the political situation in the United States changes. True of many European countries as well. So, there is no trust. It's not about trust, but there are basic expectations. There are diplomatic norms that again, it's not about keeping to people's word or just trusting, but when, you have, for example, you're negotiating, and then while those negotiations are happening, you launch an attack, even though the negotiations are progressing positively. Well, if you do that, then nobody's going to want to negotiate with you again, which is why most countries don't do that. Again, doesn't matter if they're democracies or dictatorships. It is in their interest to be able to negotiate. It is in their interest to be able to pursue diplomacy. Now, diplomacy can break down, and then that can lead to conflict. But to use diplomacy as a cover for a sneak attack, that's very unusual. That's not what most countries do most of the time, and with good reason. So, obviously, I'm referring to American behavior with regard to Iran. That is what I just described, is exactly what the United States did to Iran twice. But it's not only that. I mean, the U.S. and Israel are complete partners in this. They are literally arm in arm certainly doing the Iran war together. Israel was the sole physical actor in the Gaza genocide. as that is ongoing, and they are acting on their own, or at least by themselves in Lebanon. But all of this happens with American support and American weapons and American intelligence, and you know, so the U.S. and Israel are partners here, and so Iran not only looks at these two incidents of Trump using negotiations as a smokescreen, they also look at the ceasefires that Trump uh, imposed, basically. Um, or certainly convinced Israel to accept in both Gaza and Lebanon. So in Lebanon, many will argue that the war on Iran started. There was the strike on the supreme leader Ali Khamenei, and he was killed. And shortly after that, Hezbollah launched a large barrage of rockets at Israel. So people say, "Well, look, Hezbollah, jumped into the war. Uh, Hezbollah did that." Well, what that overlooks is that Israel had violated that ceasefire, according to the United Nations, over 10,000 times in a little over a year. There were daily bombings in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, even though there was supposed to be a ceasefire. And Israel said, "Well, we're firing at Hezbollah." Well, yeah, that's who you made the ceasefire with. You didn't make the ceasefire with the Lebanese government. You made it with Hezbollah, and you're still firing. And for the most part, Hezbollah did not fire back. Um, there were once or twice over the course of that time that Hezbollah did retaliate, but that was it. I mean, these were literally daily occurrences. Israel bombing southern Lebanon, attacking in other ways southern Lebanon. They maintained a troop presence in southern Lebanon all of that time. All of these were violations of the ceasefire. In Gaza, um, as of March 18th, was the last report that I was able to find, Israel had violated the ceasefire there at least 2,073 times. Again, these are UN figures. Now, there have been a few incidents of Hamas firing at Israeli soldiers since that time. And according Israel, and Israel, of course, has a very, very broad definition of ceasefire violations. So if Hamas fighters are trapped in an area where that is beyond the artificial line that has been drawn, splitting Gaza in two, and those fighters appear, they come up for air, for food, to forage, whatever, and encounter Israeli soldiers, that's called a ceasefire violation. They have, they are said to have come out of, wherever and attacked Israeli soldiers. But even if we're being generous, Israel's accusations are of 34 violations compared to over 2,000 by the Israelis. And then, of course, we get to American behavior. And American behavior has been, obviously quite atrocious. And it brings you to a place where, now nobody can negotiate with you. Nobody can trust you to even live up to the basic norms. Again, it's not about placing trust in people. It's about believing that you will hold to certain norms that most countries have always, the overwhelming majority of countries have held to. Um, you want to talk about a country that didn't? We can look back at Nazi Germany and their agreement with the Soviet Union. And as you could see, it didn't work out well for them when they did that. But, even whether it had or not, I mean, certainly that was an argument against trying to pursue diplomacy with Hitler and the Nazis back then. Um, we are dealing here with a level of impunity that is, even for the U.S. and Israel, a new one. It's a step up. Um, the attacks on civilian sites in Iran, which, certainly Iran has attacked civilian sites in the Gulf states, and they have launched longer range missiles at Israel that have hit civilian sites. Um, but the clear and immediate targeting that's very much more direct because the American and Israeli forces are there. They're flying over these spots and dropping bombs as opposed to launching long range missiles or drones. Um, this is just done with impunity. When Israel did this in Gaza, when then Israel would target intentionally mosques, hospitals, schools, residential buildings, refugee camps. Um, when Israel did that, they would constantly say, "Well, there's Hamas there. Hamas is there. Hamas is there. Hamas is hiding. They're using human shields. It's complete nonsense. These are fabrications. Uh, they are, which is not to say that there were never any people who were Hamas fighters in any of those places. Hamas fighters also sometimes go to a hospital. Hamas fighters also sometimes go home to their families. That does, in fact, happen. Um, Many of those sites did not have such people in them. That was the testimony. But at least Israel was saying it. They were making that nonsensical excuse. They're not even bothering with that now. Now the Trump administration is just talking about they're going to bomb a bridge. They're not saying it's a military bridge. They're not saying it's something that is being used for military purposes. Saying they're bombing a bridge, and they're explicitly saying they're bombing that bridge because it is part of their program to destroy Iran's civilian infrastructure. These are war crimes. Israel has essentially emptied southern Lebanon. Um, Forcing 1 million people out of their homes, and they are now saying that they'll allow Christians and certain Sunni Muslims to return, but if those people allow any Shia Lebanese to go back to those places, Israel will bomb them. They didn't say Hezbollah; they said any Shia Muslims, which is worth noting. There are actually Shia Muslims who are not only not part of Hezbollah, there are, this is not absolute. There are Shia Muslims who do not like Hezbollah either and do not support them. Uh, these are war crimes, pure and simple. There's just no other way about it. And when you're dealing with those situations, those kinds of aims, and again, making no excuse for Iran. But Iran's situation is different. Iran warned the United States and Israel and all of their neighbors how they would have to respond if they were attacked by a vastly superior military force, which is the U.S. and Israel. They can't simply go toe to toe with them. They can't do it. They know they'll lose in no time whatsoever. They just don't have the military capability. What they have is asymmetric warfare, and asymmetric warfare targets civilian sites, and Iran has been doing it in a tit for tat manner for the most part. They're doing it, again, attacking civilian sites in Qatar, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, all of those places. Those are also war crimes. They are not legal acts. They are not legitimate acts of self-defense. But I don't really see what option is left to Iran. That is not the case for the United States and Israel, who willingly, eagerly initiated this war without provocation, without an imminent threat, and while negotiations were actually proceeding. Now, we can talk about the fact that this war is very likely to end with U.S. and Israeli interests worse off than they were before, and of course, with Iran largely devastated. Um, you know, People talk about this side's winning. No one's winning. There's no winning in this war. I mean, you can talk about objectives. The Iranian government's objective is to survive, and they are looking very likely to achieve that objective. Um, but that's not much of an objective, and Iran is going to obviously have suffered enormously. 2,000 Iranians have already died, most of them civilians. The global economy is a wreck. It'll take months. We can go through all of that. But the point I wanted to really drive home here is that the United States and Israel have created a situation where they cannot be dealt with. It's not a matter of trust anymore. You cannot even believe that they will act in rational ways. This war is wholly irrational. It was begun out of the obsession of Benjamin Netanyahu and the stupidity, the unbelievable stupidity of Donald Trump. That's really what this comes down to. And you can't expect rational decision making from these two countries, even when Trump and Netanyahu are gone. You may get rational decision makers. You might not. And that's the legacy of this war that the US and Israel have started against Iran. So I'll leave it there and ask again if you can support the work of Cutting Through. You can go to mitchellplitnick.substack.com, and there are links there for becoming a paid subscriber to Cutting Through and for donating to support this work, supporting an independent analysis and media that I think is very much needed in this day and age, and especially under these circumstances. So if you can support, that's great. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.